Hey everybody, hey everybody, hey, Robert Williams, how you doing? Shalom to you, my dear brother. I'm sending you so much love today. As we come up, we are talking about gerrymandering, the Voting Rights Act. This is the 60th anniversary of the signing of that iconic piece of legislation. Many people are saying that that is the most consequential legislation signed in American history, the most successful. Is that so? What is gerrymandering, really? And why is it so consequential now? We see what's happening in Texas. Everybody's going to be spreading. So, what I want you to do is buckle up and listen to David Daly, because, of course, he was on CNN this morning, and I was so excited to see him on CNN. So, let's get right to it, everybody. 3. Hi, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, sending you so much love today here on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe, share the show. And I'm on X at Santita J. I'm on Blue Sky, santitajackson.bsky.social. And of course, I am on Facebook, Santita Jackson and Friends. That's the only place. That's the only place where I can really accept, where I can accept anyone. Today, 60 years ago today, the Voting Rights Act was signed. Dr. King said that the crown jewel of the civil rights movement was voting rights. You had the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. The 13th Amendment freed Black Americans from slavery. 14th Amendment made us citizens, which gave rise to birthright citizenship. Because, of course, the idea was to send Black people back to Africa, not to the countries of your origin or of your ancestry, but just to send you back to Africa. They created Liberia. And people like Frederick Douglass said, no. We are in on this American project. We built the country, as a matter of fact, not for free. We just weren't paid for it. So, no, we're citizens. So that was fought for. But the 15th Amendment gave us the right to vote. And it has been of such consequence that it was not enacted for 95 years. That is something that President Lyndon Baines Johnson saw when he became president. He said, oh my goodness, given his experience with indigenous people in Texas who spoke Spanish, because in fact he was a school teacher with Mexican Americans who were a beleaguered class there. You see that notably in the iconic movie Giant with James Dean and Elizabeth Taylor and Rock Hudson. You saw how indigenous people who speak Spanish were really second class, third class, not even classed as citizens. And the marching, the dying was about the vote. Because without the vote, you have no rights. Every right that you have flows from the vote, which is why David Daly's work is so important. Because it's not just important to Black people, David Daly, it's important to all Americans. Because all Americans didn't have the right to vote at the founding of this American franchise. And we're holding on to it rather tenuously. So let's talk about this. We're going to be talking, of course, with our brothers and sisters from Texas. The president is threatening to use the FBI to arrest these persons who are really trying to save our republic. Democracy is a way that you govern. The republic is the foundation upon we are governing. So let's think about that, everybody. Let's talk about the Voting Rights Act. Let's talk about gerrymandering, because what's happening in Texas is spreading like a virus. Indeed, David Daly, I see the books across your shoulder. Of course, Rat F. Look, when I saw you on CNN this morning, even the host, she said, everybody wants to say Rat F.
Can't say it.
You can't say it, but you can do it, right? And then, of course, I see unrigged over your shoulder and anti-democratic over your other shoulder. This is this trilogy of books. If you really want to understand America and just being an American, and your vote is tied all up in that, everybody. It is tied up in it. Your representation is tied up in it. Think about that, everybody. Think about it. We're talking this morning about gerrymandering, about the Voting Rights Act, about all of these things, because it seems that so much comes back to the vote, David Daly. Why?
Why? Well, the vote is how we make decisions. The vote is how power is awarded and determined. And with something like gerrymandering, it's corrosive because we assume that the party with the most votes wins. The people with the most votes win. That's how we're taught this in school. But the reality of it all is quite different because our state legislatures, our congressional delegations, they're districted. Lines are drawn, and those lines aren't just there. They are placed there. They are drawn intentionally by the same politicians who seek to hold those seats. And when they draw those lines in a way to pack voters in to determine results, to essentially pick winners and losers before anyone has cast a ballot, then when we go to the ballot, we don't have much of a choice. And the choice has been made for us in advance by how these lines are drawn. And this is what we're seeing around the country right now as this mid-decade gerrymandering war that started in Texas continues to spread nationwide. Control of Congress is very, very close, right? It's 3 seats that separate the two parties. So we expected to have a very competitive midterm election next year. Now, it's true that the congressional map is largely divvied up between the two sides, but there's 37, 40 competitive districts, a handful that can go back and forth, and we assumed that there would be a race to 218 seats and that the party with the most votes would get there. Instead, what Republicans are trying to do is to give themselves a big boost before a single vote has been cast. They're trying to add 5 seats in Texas. And so Democrats in California are saying, well, if you do that, we'll destroy our independent commission, and we'll add 4 Democratic seats here. And Ohio says, well, we'll add 2 more of our own. And Illinois and New York say, well, in which case we're going to take a look at our maps. And this is a spiral to the bottom. It's a race to the bottom, and it's not a very far race because we are very, very close to already reaching it.
Well, let me ask you this, because
in those states, this is terrible for representation.
Why is it terrible for representation? Because Sheila Jackson Lee, the iconic Sheila Jackson Lee, Sylvester Turner, who had been the mayor of Houston, who ran and won her seat. He died he had been there a couple of months. He died the night of the State of the Union. The governor of Texas decided not to hold an election immediately, isn't that like the common practice? He said, I'm going to wait until November, a year almost. How can this, and I haven't heard enough people just raise up some kind of hue and cry about that, David.
No, it's an intentional effort to keep those seats empty. There's 4 Democratic seats that are empty right now. So the House...
There are 4 seats that are empty right now.
It ought to be 219, 216, and instead it's 219, 212 because of these 4 Democratic vacancies, largely kept that way because Republican governors won't schedule special elections, which means that Republicans can hold the House with 213 votes, right? It gives more Republicans the ability to oppose a bill or just not show up or cast a tough vote. This is a very sneaky strategic play. But why is this bad for representation? Well, first off, if you're a Republican in California and you're about to be gerrymandered into a state that's, 48 Democrats and 4 Republicans, or if you're a Democrat, I'm sorry, if you're a Republican in Illinois, or if you're a Democrat in Texas, you are not going to have any real representation or say. You are going to live in a district that is represented by someone of the opposite party, and how you vote is not going to really matter at all. But what they're also going to do in Texas to make this possible is they're going after those districts held by Black and brown Democrats, and they're going to crack them in little pieces and attach a piece of the city to a big swath of a rural central white Texas. And the goal is to turn these into Republican seats. But the other thing that this does, of course, right, is it gets rid of the strong Black leaders who represent these cities and these communities in some of these historic districts.
But doesn't it also bend their positions? Because what you end up doing is you can keep a Black face or brown face in a high place, but then when you bend the district that way, you also have to bend their politics. They have to become less progressive.
When you have all these non-competitive races, really what it does is it makes the party primary mean everything. And who shows up to vote in the party primary? Not many people, first of all. A turnout in these absolutely abysmal. Sometimes that's intentional, right? They're held in June or July or August when most people are away, not thinking about politics at all. So you might only have 15, 20% turnout. And then you might have 10 candidates running in a party primary. So somebody could win with as little as 25, 26% of the vote. It happens here in Massachusetts all the time in Democratic congressional primaries. And then somebody who has won 25% of the vote in a low turnout primary, a percentage, a fraction of voters in a district, moves on to a non-competitive general election. So they are only accountable to a really small number of people. They don't care about anybody else.
What is going on in Texas? I mean, is it becoming more clear as the days go on? I mean, first of all, define gerrymandering so we are all functioning with the same definition.
Gerrymandering is when you draw political districts in such a way as to give one party or the other an advantage in those districts, right? So if you have an equal number of Democrats and Republicans in a state, and let's say you have 4 districts in that state, you could, let's say you're a Democrat drawing at the lines in that state, you might pack all of the Republicans into one of those districts, and then you scatter the other Republicans harmlessly across the other 3. So that is how you can control 75% of the map with 50% of the vote. A fair map would be 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats in a 50-50 state, right? But how you draw those lines, you could create, 3-1 either way. And that becomes unfair. And that becomes magnified when a state like California has 52 districts, or a state like Texas has 38, or Illinois has 17. Right now, Illinois has 17 congressional seats, 14 Democrats and 3 Republicans. So it's 83% of the seats go to Democrats. But the 2-party vote in Illinois back in 2024 was about 52.7% for the Democrats. So they've drawn the lines in such a way that 52% of the people can hold 83% of the seats. And that is the power of gerrymandering.
So Republicans are disenfranchised in Illinois, which is what you pointed out on CNN this morning.
That's exactly right. And Republicans have done more of this across the country. Democrats have done it too. Republicans have done it more, and they've done it better. And they recognize the ability of modern technology to use voter data and sophisticated computer mapping software to draw these lines before Democrats, and so that they got a big head start on the modern gerrymandering arms race. But there aren't any angels in the redistricting fight. The difference is that when Democrats held trifecta power in Washington, they attempted to put an end to partisan gerrymandering, and you had 50 Democrats and 50 Republicans voted no on this back in 2021, and so it didn't clear the filibuster in the Senate. When the U.S. Supreme Court and Chief Justice Roberts closed the doors of the federal courts to partisan gerrymandering cases back in 2019, it was the 5 Republican justices who said no and the 4 Democrats who said we have to fix this. So it's not, an equal equivalence here, but certainly both sides have done it.
How long do you expect the standoff with the Texas Democrats to last? And what will be the impact?
Texas Democrats have fled the state in order to try to deny a quorum to make it impossible for these maps to pass. I think it's a tremendous short-term strategy, right? They're making good trouble, as John Lewis said, right? They're bringing real moral clarity to this issue. They are speaking out nationwide, getting a lot of attention, and they're connecting what's happening in Texas to absolutely everybody, right? This is everybody's fight because this is going to affect control of Congress that we all live under. So that's really important. How long can they hold out? I don't know. Donald Trump is talking about getting the FBI involved to find and arrest them. There's talk of extradition back to Texas. You've got the governor and the attorney general in Texas in a bit of an arms race of their own, trying to decide who can talk tougher and arrest these people or kick them out of office. They're already facing fines of $500 a day. And let's face it, these are people with jobs and families. I don't know how long they'll be able to hold out. A couple more weeks, a couple more months.
Don't they make like $600?
Yeah, it's not a lot of money that you make in the Texas legislature. And if you're being fined $500 a day,
that's the month.
Fast. So we will see how long they're able to hold out. This is not a strategy that is going to stop this.
Yeah.
I'm not sure there is a strategy that can stop Texas from doing this. They have the votes and they have time on their side, and we'll see what they do. But Democrats do certainly need to call attention to the unfairness of what is happening, how these elections are trying to be rigged. And voters hate this. It doesn't matter if they're Democrats, Republicans, or independents. That there's a new poll from YouGov that just dropped this week that says big majorities of Democrats, Republicans, and independents want these lines to be drawn by commissions or neutral parties. They don't want politicians drawing them in such a way as to choose their own voters and lock themselves in office. So every time these Democrats make this case, I imagine a big part of the country across party lines nodding their heads.
Well, it was interesting that you pointed out how rich it was that the Texas Democrats, a portion of them are in Illinois, where effectively Republicans have been gerrymandered out of their fair share of power. Let me put it that way. Why did you think it was important to bring that up in that context?
Well, because I think it's important to notice that Democratic governors right now are talking really tough about the redistricting, and they're saying this is a war and we're going to get off the sidelines, and we're going to stop fighting as if we have one hand tied behind our back, or we're going to stop bringing a knife to a gun battle. And I think that that's a little ridiculous, because Democrats certainly took advantage of redistricting wherever they could back in 2021. I know that they're trying to fix it, But this is not a case. I know that what Congress tried to do in 2021, I know what the vote on the court was in 2019. But Democrats have not unilaterally disarmed here.
Mm-hmm.
They drew a map in Illinois that they control 83% of the seats with 52% of the vote. And I think that has to be, called out. I mean, Maryland is the same way. Plenty of Republicans live there. It's a 7-1 Democratic map. Democrats maximized their seats in Oregon, Nevada, New Mexico. And so that's an important piece of what's happening here. Because as we look at what's happening across other states, it's not going to stop in Texas. So California can respond, but there's not a whole lot the Democratic governors and states can do elsewhere. I don't think you can expand on the 14-3 map that was drawn in Illinois. Most people don't. New York can't get around its independent commission until 2028 elections. You can't draw an 8-0 map in Maryland. The state court won't let you. You probably can't do anything else in Oregon or New Mexico. So when you look at the math of this, Republicans are going to take 5 in Texas. It's possible Democrats fire back with 4 in California. But then Republicans are going to go to Ohio and take 2 more, to Florida and take 2 more, to Missouri, to Indiana for 1 apiece. They could go into Kansas, North Carolina, Kentucky, New Hampshire. They've got more targets and more opportunities, partially because they've been doing this longer and they control more states. But if we're looking at politics, at the horse race politics, it dramatically benefits the Republicans, who simply have more targets and more ammunition.
But for me, but where does the sense of fairness come in? And I'm not being Pollyanna. But, I'm only saying this because, look, and I'm talking about George Washington, and he's someone, I just believe in studying history, like you, David Daley. And one certainly can find fault with any human being. And certainly the founding fault, one of the founding faults, the deep crevice in America, this is this cleave of slavery, not simply because it was racialized, but because it existed. No human being should be owned, period. That having been said, these men were forward thinking in many ways. And they said a lot of things that were quite true. They even gave us the ability to completely rework our government if it did not work. Hopefully by nonviolent means, but here we go. And this 2-party system was something that gave George Washington great pause. He said, it could lead to despotism, tyranny. He felt that it would lead to undue foreign influence. He felt it would create unnecessary divisions amongst the people, and it would prevent elected officials from governing for the common good. You're just going to, you're not supposed to simply govern for your side. I don't want a Republican president. I don't want a Democratic president. I want a president of the United States who steps back, gives me the 30,000-foot view and says, you know what? Oh, wow, maybe I see something I didn't see before. This is what's going to be best for the country. That's not Pollyanna. That promotes social sustainability. Well, if you look at these town hall meetings now, David Daley, author of Unrigged, Rat Effed, and Anti-Democratic. You've got to get those 3 books, everybody. Unrigged, Rat Effed, starting with Rat Effed, then Unrigged, and then Anti-Democratic. You've got to get them. What's happening now to me is very, very dangerous. Very dangerous for everybody. I guess no one's an angel. No one's completely evil. It's just stop. Because gerrymandering, Republicans out of power, out of their fair share of power in Illinois, that's not a good thing. And I'm glad you mentioned that today. But now, but gerrymandering, Democrats out of power in Texas, it's just wrong. But it's also not right to have 900,000 people of color unregistered to vote. I mean, goodness gracious, it's the law in Texas for you to get registered to vote upon graduation from high school. They don't enforce it, but they sure are sticking ice on everybody. I'm saying at some point, when do we get to the common good, David? And I don't think that that's some pie in the sky notion. Where we are right now is very. You look at these town hall meetings, as I've said. If you can feel it in the air. People are very, very angry, and they feel that the American dream does not exist, and they feel that the country has failed them increasingly. And when I look at this map, I mean, okay, California, they're going to add some seats. And then, but what are we going to do when you get a Republican governor, when you get a Democratic governor? Are we going to continue to redraw the districts? Is that what we're going? Is that how we're doing this now?
We're heading down a really dangerous path. I mean, we're already in a really dangerous place, and it's getting worse.
Why do you say it's dangerous, and what is the dangerous path? Solomon said, you're speaking the truth. The Dems have been drawing district lines all over the country for decades, and I applaud what Texas is doing, and now Jasmine Crockett can go away. She's an embarrassment. I don't think so. She speaks for said group of people. I say that about, I'm not going to compare her. She's not Marjorie Taylor Greene, in my estimation. But they speak to said group of people, and these people have a right to be represented in the U.S. House of Representatives, David Daley. The House of Representatives is too small anyway. It wasn't supposed to expand with the population.
Hasn't expanded in 100 years, right? We're in a place in which we have almost no competitive elections left for a House that was supposed to be a perfect replica of the people in miniature, as John Adams said. And, it's not. A majority of Americans cannot rise up and switch control of their politics. And that's dangerous. That's tyranny. And there are state legislatures around the country where huge majorities are meaningless because of gerrymandering, and one party keeps control even when voters come forth and say we want to change it because of how that party drew the lines to lock them into power. And if this was happening this way in other countries, we'd have something to say about it.
Yeah.
We would call it anti-democratic. We would call it a banana republic. Here we just call it Wisconsin or North Carolina. It is happening right here, right now. And lots of people live in these states.
What did you say? We call it Wisconsin in the United States. You're right. And that to me is very dangerous, because now we're living in a moment in which, well, my mother said the wheels came off the wagon when Kennedy was killed. She said, up to that point, Americans had a basic faith in the United States government. She said, and that when he was killed, everything flipped. Dr. King said, I'm not going to make it through the decade. I mean, he knew. If you kill him like this, and when you look now that we're looking at history, we're seeing what he was pushing for. He was like the last independent president we had. When you've got this much mistrust, this much distrust of the Supreme Court, both houses of Congress, the presidency, the healthcare system. Can I continue? David.
Let's be clear, the Supreme Court deserves it.
Well, they do.
Right.
But even in the integrity of the vote.
Yeah, no. Our institutions have plenty wrong with them, but we've also lost all faith in these institutions, and things have become so broken that and we're so separate in our own separate silos with our own separate facts. I think we've all experienced the Thanksgiving dinners or the family reunions in which you don't even feel like you can have a conversation with someone on the other side because the entire factual universe is so different. And I'm not saying one side is right and the other side is wrong. I'm just saying it's also diverse and split, that we can't even, talk to those we love without getting into screaming matches or saying you don't even understand the basic facts here. So how we come out of all of this is going to take a long, long time. But the fact that we are intentionally drawing these districts across so many states in such a way as to increase polarization, to increase extremism, to increase the brokenness of our politics is not the way to go at this moment. And the gerrymandering problem already really, really bad. We're about to make it worse. And the fact that we're about to make it worse at a moment in which a few years ago it looked like we had a little bit better of a handle on this, citizens were coming together in states.
Yeah.
The lower federal courts were striking down the extreme Democratic and Republican gerrymanders. And now we see this race to the bottom in which even the states that were doing it right are saying there's no incentive for us to do it right anymore because everybody else is doing it wrong. So we're going to, stop doing it right. I mean, Virginia's representatives today are making noise about getting rid of their commission. So this is spreading across the country, and this is not a fight that ends well.
Well, my father said he saw Beto O'Rourke, who I know we've known the O'Rourke since please, I was a teenager. His father was the chair of the Jackson campaign in '88 in Texas and was a big supporter. And there's a wonderful picture that Beto published when he was first running for the U.S. Senate of him when he was about 12 or 13 with Dad during the campaign. So we've known him, and I love him. But I do disagree with this because he said we've got to fight fire with fire. And as you know, my father struggles with speech, particularly later in the day. But my mother, they turn on the news because my father wants to see it all day, all night. So Beto came on and he was talking about fighting fire with fire. And she said my father popped up in the bed and said, "You fight fire with water." Adding fire to fire increases the fire. Water puts the fire out. I can't wait to talk with him more about what the water is. Is it registering people to vote, and also committing people to fairness, David Daly? Because this unfairness, gerrymandering people, drawing lines that take people out of power is not the way. What do you? Can you give me some different scenarios in which we draw these districts so that people are represented fairly? I mean, understanding that, for example, Chicago on paper has been the most segregated city in the United States for decades. So Black people are clustered. That's why the seat that my brother occupies now, the 1st Congressional District, is the seat that has been held longer by an African American than any seat in the history of the United States, because Black people have been packed into, an area. But America's very segregated, just generally speaking. What are some of the scenarios that you can paint for me where we can construct districts that are representative of people, but that, that include as many people as possible?
I have come to think that the way to fix this is through a more proportional House. I think that in some ways it's single member districts themselves that are the problem here.
What do you mean by that? What is a single member district? Do you think you need more than one member?
You draw a line and create a district and one person represents it. When that's the case, how you draw the lines determines who represents it. If we were to draw larger, bigger districts and have them represented by more people, and we used a more proportional form of voting, like ranked choice, what you would see is a very different delegation. You would see the impact of gerrymandering melt away. You would see every district in the country become a swing district. and you would see Democrats, Republicans, Independents, third parties. It would open up our politics in entirely new ways. I mean, so instead of having Democrats carve up Illinois into 17 seats designed to elect as many Democrats as possible, you would draw lines by a commission, equal number of people. Let's pretend Illinois has 18 districts because that is an easier number to use. For example, you would have 6 districts of 3, and you would elect proportionally. So 25% of the vote in any one of those districts plus 1 would be enough to win a seat. Mm-hmm. So Democrats and Republicans in all of these areas would have representation and a voice and someone who they felt mirrored their views more closely. I mean, I live in Massachusetts, 9 Democrats, 0 Republicans. But that's not right. There's plenty of Republicans here. We elect Republican governors sometimes, but we haven't had a Republican in the delegation to Congress since 1994. If you had 3 districts of 3, you would have a delegation with 6 Democrats and 3 Republicans. Everybody would feel like they had a voice. If you did the same thing in Missouri and Tennessee, it might be 6-3 the other way instead of 8-1, right? And so what you see here is, without the answer being partisan or helping one side or the other, that there's a neutral fix that allows us to be represented more closely to our numbers than how we've been artificially, but quite intentionally, stuck in a specific district. And if you were to do it this way, I think you would send to Congress and state legislatures people who were much more interested in governing than in just paying attention to their base. They'd be much more inclined to represent everybody, to get along. You'd have New England Republicans again. You'd have, Southern Democrats again. You might have some independents, and they might actually be able to, get things done.
Well, you remember Lonnie Guinier?
Yeah.
Okay, of course, brilliant.
And this is along the lines of something I think she would very much back, a more proportional system.
I heard her give a speech at Rainbow Push, and this was just after she had been unceremoniously removed from consideration for being one of the assistant attorney generals for the United States. Yeah. Brilliant legal mind, Harvard law professor.
And it was Bill Clinton who stabbed the knife in her back. Right?
Yeah, even though they nominated her.
Yes.
She wasn't a liability as much as the right wing came after her, because her politics were so progressive. She, of course, has
since became controversial, and the Democratic Party cut bait. Yeah,
they cut bait, and they cut her and let her drift out to sea. But she talked about a new politics. She said, "Look, we've got to grow up in our politics." I'm paraphrasing her. She was so brilliant on this day. She said, "We've got to go from winner take all, I win, you lose, to, I win, you win. I might win a little bit more. I might get a little bit more marbles than you, but everybody can walk away from the table satisfied. Maybe not happy, but satisfied." And so she was speaking of that proportional representation that you were just describing. She said, "Look, if we're going, basically, she didn't put it in such stark terms, because in 1994 or so, we were not there, but we were almost there. We were headed in this direction."
She saw it. She saw it earlier than almost anyone.
She really did. I mean, because this was like 93, because she had just come through the meat grinder. And because in 94, that is when we got Newt Gingrich and the Contract for a New America, right? And which, arced our politics in a completely different direction. But the Clintons were moving there anyway, because they were responding to Jackson and the Rainbow. That's how you got the Democratic Leadership Council and the right-wing Democratic politics. I mean, it is what it is. How do we get there, David? Because now I feel like we're going to go every time you have a new governor, you're going to get new districts.
I think that's right.
That's unsustainable.
It's unsustainable. And I think maybe what this moment will teach us is that we need a national solution. And that this state-by-state solution doesn't get us there and has the potential to spiral into the toxicity and the blood sport that we're watching unfold right now. So that if we want to fix that, it's going to take a national fix. And can we come together and figure out what that is in a way that everybody wins? Everybody wins a little. Everybody wins a little bit everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe people don't feel like everything is quite so broken, or that the stakes are quite so high all the time, right? We're doing this now because everybody feels the stakes are so high. 3 seats in the House, life or death, completely different directions based on which party holds control. And can we bring that back to a different place? I think we can if we elected people a different way.
What way is that?
I think it's more proportionally. I think it's shifting the House from 435 single-member winner-take-all districts to, and it can be the same number, but proportional multi-member districts in all of these states, using ranked choice voting to elect members. We use ranked choice voting all over the country. Maine and Alaska use it for almost all of their elections. New York City just used it to elect its mayor. It's used in all kinds of cities, whether in Minnesota and California. It's also used, an awful lot in small towns in Utah, and the Virginia Republicans used it to nominate Glenn Youngkin back in 2021. Indiana Republicans have used it. It's a really great tool for finding a majority winner, and it is the kind of tool that I think we really desperately need in this, especially out of control moment. I mean, it might be the water that puts this out, as your dad might say.
Well, it's because it is an out of control moment, because Gavin Newsom, in order to balance the scales, I understand that. It's just, I think the national solution, we're going to have that. Because I worry that this verbal violence will become physical violence, because people feel this that deeply. When these $1 trillion cuts to healthcare hit, and they will hit after November 2026, when the Social Security cuts really hit, which is everything's designed to hit just after the midterms. I don't think it's going to be an easy time for anybody, David, because this is a very, very perilous time, socially, politically. But I am very hopeful, because I think that if we ask the right questions and really help to push the conversation in a constructive direction, we can really make a more perfect union. Help me to understand, if you will, the importance of the Voting Rights Act in your estimation. It's the 60th anniversary today. Signing of it. And many people say that this is the most consequential piece of legislation signed in American history, because it impacted more people everywhere. Many people are not aware that white women could not serve on juries in the South, because white women in particular, but white women were not completely enfranchised. It changed everything. Indeed, Dr. King said that this was a crown jewel to him of the civil rights movement, the Voting Rights Act.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I have to jump off onto another a call in just a second. But no, I think that's exactly right. I think that the Voting Rights Act and the Reconstruction Amendments to the Constitution are what made us a multiracial democracy. And it, in many ways, ought to be considered as the founding texts of the strongest articulation of what our founding documents mean, right? The idea that everyone is created equal, although we didn't say everyone in the founding documents. And the idea of the Voting Rights Act and the Reconstruction Amendments is to change all men to everyone. And that, to me, is the real spirit of this nation at its best. And that is what we need to find our way back to. The Voting Rights Act has been under attack for all of those 60 years. There has never been a moment in which it was not being questioned and under fire. From a month after South Carolina said, we don't need to be under the thumb of the federal government. In the Katzenbach case, almost immediately after the filing. So this fight has been going on for a long time, and it's a fight about what kind of a democracy we want to be.
What would you like to say?
I do need to jump. I'm sorry.
No worries. Just let us know what you want us to think about on this day.
Yeah. Well, these fights continue. These fights are important. And we all, I think, have to find a way to, there's a way through this that is not crashing down to the bottom. And it's important that we find a way to talk about it and find that path and choose that path. Instead of fighting fire with fire, let's fight the fire with water. I think that's the right idea. Thank you.
Unrigged, Rat Effed, and Anti-Democratic. You've got to get those books. Sending him so much love today. Everybody, I want to go through some of the questions or some of the comments that you've been making before we go. Think about the Voting Rights Act today. Think about Bloody Sunday. Think about those 3 marches. It was actually 3 of them. Andrew Young's daughter, Ambassador Andrew Young's daughter, Andrea, reminded me, she and Reverend Dr. Ralph Abernathy's daughter, Donzale, reminded me that they spent their spring vacations in that Selma to Montgomery, and those Selma to Montgomery marches. And of course, the march, Bloody Sunday, brought on the deaths of Reverend James Reeb. Of course, we had Jimmy Lee Jackson, the veteran. We had Viola Liuzzo, a Detroit mother of 5, married to a union leader who was so horrified by what she saw on Bloody Sunday that she came down to be a part of the Selma to Montgomery march. And then she was killed transporting people to the airport after the march. May God bless her and her family, and Reverend James Reeb and his family, and the Abernathys and the Youngs and the Kings, and so many people, Cotton Reeder and Amelia Boynton, who got everything kicked off. She was the one who reached out to Dr. King, Mrs. Amelia Boynton. And she said, hey, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Doc, we got to get you down here. We got a problem down here in Selma. Voting is the right from which all rights flow. That is why it is important for all of us to get registered to vote. That is why it is important for all of us to have our rights to vote restored after we've served our time in prison. Many prisons, in fact, are based upon, in terms of their, they make up congressional districts. They make up congressional districts using the prisoners who cannot vote, though some of them should be able to vote because they've not been convicted. Many prisoners are just housed. I've got Texas State Representative Ron Reynolds with us, and I'm so glad he's going to be with us a little bit later this afternoon, but we got about 6 or 7 minutes left, but I wanted to speak with him. We just had David Daly on. We were talking about, he followed you on CNN this morning. Of course, you were on yesterday explaining what's going on with you and your colleagues who are situated here in Chicago. Some people are still in Texas and some yet are in New York. I wanted to know the latest, because now it seems that the Trump administration, who've been pushing to get these 3 to 5 extra Republican seats out of Texas, that they're pushing to have you arrested. They're pushing the FBI to intervene. So they're making this a federal case. So talk to us. What is going on?
Well, Santita, first of all, happy 60th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act. It is great to be on with you on this historic day in our nation's history.
Why does it mean something to you today in a particular way, particularly given what you're fighting for right now?
It means so much to me because I know that I wouldn't be here today talking to you as the first African American state representative in Fort Bend County, the county that I live in, since Reconstruction, if it wasn't for the Voting Rights Act. Because the county that I live in Texas had what they call whites only primaries before the Voting Rights Act was enacted. That was just in this lifetime. People that have voted for me were once subject to whites only primaries. So this is in our lifetime. And I've had people that have cast a vote for me that were able to do so, that have showed me, Santita, their poll tax. Like literally, they still kept a copy of it. And I was like, oh my God, I've seen and read about this in history books, but you're showing me this is your poll tax that you had to pay to vote if you were a person of color. So it means so much to me as I stand here today speaking to you, as I met with your father, Reverend Jesse Jackson, and other freedom fighters, knowing that they made the ultimate sacrifice, that they risked it all, they put their lives at risk to break those Jim Crow barriers that prohibited people from voting, from being able to hold public office. And so for me to be with my colleagues, breaking quorum away from Texas, it crystallizes what the moment is. This is our civil rights moment. We have the baton now. You know, sometimes we play armchair quarterback. If I was on the field, I would have threw this way. I would have ran that touchdown in. Well, this is our civil rights moment because we weren't there during that struggle. Many of us were, not me and people my age, but now we have the baton. And what are we doing on our watch? How are we making good trouble? How are we standing up to the opposition? And that the opposition, the oppressor, I would submit is President Trump and the MAGA extremists that are trying to take us back. So for me, this is a day of celebration. It's a day of reflection, but it's a day of resolve to keep doing my part to lean forward so that we don't keep repeating these uh, basically white supremacists, racist tactics, because this racial gerrymandering that is happening in Texas with these 5 congressional seats is a microcosm of what's going to happen in other states if Texas is allowed to do it.
What what is the pathway forward? Because as Mrs. Jackson said to you yesterday, she was stunned. I shared this with David Daly just a few minutes ago when my father sat up in bed as he was watching the news, and he said, "You don't fight fire with fire, you fight it with water." You got 900,000 people unregistered to vote in Texas. Is it black or is it black and brown people?
Black and brown people.
I mean,
Mostly.
that's a million people almost.
1 million people, right.
And this is racialized, but it really is. And I think that whites are beginning to see that this is about poor people.
That's right.
As Reverend would put it, the boat stuck at the bottom.
That's right.
And we are all, there was, in the American Revolution, the first person to get killed was a black person, but not the second.
Mm.
It was, you had indigenous people who were killed at that Boston Tea Party and wounded. You had white people. They were all poor. They were all working people. And I'm wondering just how we proceed with this, because it seems to me that when you get a Republican governor or Democratic governor, we will have districts redrawn. That's unsustainable.
It is.
That's not going to work. And I'm not with Republicans being underrepresented in my home state of Illinois. I figure you let the marketplace of ideas, let this stuff play itself out, but let people be represented. Because when people feel that there's a basic sense of fairness, more and more folks say, you know what, wait a minute, pump the brakes a bit. Because a lot of what makes people greedy is when they are needy, when they feel that they're not going to get. You know what I mean? Now, some people just have that in their spirit. But I've worked with enough people with whom I have had political disagreements. And because they felt that, I think you're going to be fair, they would take up for me and say, no, no. In fact, I'd rather her be in charge because I think she's going to be fair, even if she doesn't win this thing. Right. So, I mean, help me to understand, how do we get our way through this? Because you can get a Democratic governor. I don't know how you're going to do that in Texas, but you can if you register
You
900,000
can,
people.
yeah.
You can. I mean, how do we? Because now we got California coming. I mean, this is viral. I mean, so I've got to give you all a lot of credit, because if you would let this go through, we wouldn't be having this discussion now.
That's
So,
right.
talk to me.
So, Santita, you're absolutely right. I mean, we need to get past this hyper partisan world that we're living in,
Mhm.
because it is not sustainable. I mean, it's like a seesaw. You're going up, down, up, down. We need to level it off. We need to have more stability and a stronger foundation. So, our democracy is bigger than Democrat, Republican, black, white. It is about doing what is in the best interest of the American people. But we've fallen into this alphabet soup where Democrats congregate over here, Republicans over there, and we're not working together. We're not compromising. We're not doing anything to solve problems. We're basically trying to be right all the time, even if you're wrong. And so I think that we need to get back to being statesmen. And that is something that is lost in this hyper partisan environment. It's a lot of vitriol where you demonize your opposition like they're the enemy of the state. I mean, really, the climate is horrible. The
Mhm.
climate is horrible. And unfortunately, it's the climate that President Trump, he didn't create it, but he's taken it to another level.
Oh, he's
The
fed
MAGA,
into.
the MAGA movement has taken it to another level. He didn't create it, but he has really, in my opinion, put it on steroids,
Mhm.
because basically he operates in such a way that if you are disagreeing, then you're basically being disloyal.
Mhm.
And so even inter-party, you see these clashes and these fights. And so I'm very concerned that in this environment, and we are going to find ourselves uh, at constant odds. But we need the electorate, the American people, is what can rein it all in through
Mhm.
elections. I want people to realize the power of the vote. That is how you change things. One man, one vote. Voting is the great equalizer. Obviously, gerrymandering is a way to rig that. But overall, voting is the solution. When you put voting and you put in people who are going to prioritize people over politics, people
Mhm.
over special interests. The New York mayor's race is a prime example where the people basically chose a candidate that wasn't the establishment money candidate.
Mhm.
No one really saw that coming, but
Mhm.
the people decided that this was the person that aligned with their interest. So I say that to say anything can happen when the people go out and vote, and they vote their values. And that is the way that you hold us as elected officials accountable. We are there to serve the people, but far too often the politicians are trying to pick the people that they want to serve, not the other way around. It should be the people picking the public servants, not the public servants picking the people.
What do you want us to know before you go? We'll be talking more about the Voting Rights Act and how it has changed all of our lives
Yes.
later on today at 5 o'clock Central Standard Time, everybody, because it has been called the most consequential piece of legislation ever passed in American history. In this moment, we really have to talk about that. Representative Ron Reynolds.
Yes. So I can tell you that I want the American people to realize that hope is not lost, that we have come a long way in this country as we reflect on the 60th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, but in many regards, we still have a long way to go.
Mhm.
Uh, we have to, and you've quoted this on your show before, is America is a republic only if we can protect it. I can't remember the exact
Oh,
quote.
what Benjamin Franklin was asked? Constitutional
Yes.
Convention, he walked out and spoke to the crowd. As he was preparing to speak to the crowd, a woman shouted out, "What kind of government have you given us, sir?" And he responded, "A republic, if you can keep it."
That's it. That's what I want to end on. That is the quote. That's the message right there. It's as relevant then as it is now.
It's a republic if we can keep it.
If we can keep it,
Inherent in
it's
that,
under attack.
so it's under. So you're saying, as an elected official, because you have voted, you have been voted for, and you understand the power of the electorate. You're saying that the people in America, the people really have the power. Do we know how much power we have?
I don't think people realize the power. I honestly I don't, because if they did, they would use it. They would wield it more.
Hmm.
We've allowed people to think psychologically that their vote doesn't count. People need to understand that their vote counts, and it counts more when they exercise it in numbers with their neighbors, with their family, with their friends. And so I hope that people will realize and seize that and say to elected officials, I will vote you out. I put you in and I can take you out. Every election can be a term limit, even when there are no term limits, because every election you have the power to hire and fire. So that is the message that people need to have. Use the power of your vote.
We have the power, everybody. The power is with the people. You just need to know just how powerful you are, and use that power for the common good, not just for your good. See, that's when we will have grown in our politics, when we decide that I want what's best for me is what's best for you, or at least what's best for me is what's good for you. And what's good for me is what's best for you. We are all tied together. Dr. King talked about this inextricably woven garment of destiny. We are in it together. Reverend Jackson said we came over here in different boats, but different ships. We're in the same boat now. That's real. And I hear you, Ethelene, but the Democrats are not scamming Black people. We've all been scammed. George Washington said the two-party system was going to promote unnecessary divisions in America. He said that. And you have to understand that he said that it will distract from governing for the common good. He said that parties could shift focus away from the common good toward their partisan interests. That is what he said. He said it will create unnecessary divisions amongst people. It will promote despotism and tyranny. It would foster foreign influence, all the things that we're talking about now, all the things that we're talking about right now. So that is not particular to a party. It's particular to parties. At the end of the day, we're all Americans. And more than that, we're all global citizens who breathe the same air, who exist under the same sun. The people in the Sudan, the people in Gaza, the people in Appalachia, in the Mississippi Delta, nobody should starve. God never made a mouth that God could not feed. We need to create a floor beneath which no human being should fall, because God deemed it so. And we will not be blessed until we are righteous stewards of all of the resources that God has given us. You are your brother and your sister's keeper. You need to make sure that they eat. They should be able to go to school and actualize their dreams. They should. America, instead of dropping bombs and building them, we need to be building schools and hospitals. This ought to be the place where people all over the world come to get well and get educated. And yet we are determined to be the people who kill people around the world, and we're denying education to Americans. Enough. We need to grow up in our politics. Stop blaming and shaming and start coming up with a solution. I'm not making an argument for a party. I'm making an argument for people. I don't care what party you're in. I just want you to be humane and love people and not take food off of someone's table and not deny someone housing, fair housing. No one should live in a slum. No one. And no one should have their mind perverted in a way where they feel that the slum is the best that they can do. My parents' first home, Ron Reynolds, was at a housing project in Greensboro, North Carolina, where my mother sewed curtains. My father said she planted flowers, and they made a nice little home there. Now, praise the Lord, they didn't stop there. But we ought to do that for everybody. And everyone should have a voice in America. Thank you, Texas Democrats. Thank you, leaders, Representative Ron Reynolds, and I love Mr. Wu. Love him so much. And I love all that you all are doing. And I'm glad that you are, at least a portion of you are in Illinois. How about that? We got your back here. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I'm Santita Jackson.